Шановні журналісти,
Esteemed journalists, esteemed guests, we are starting the next press briefing. Now we'll be talking about Ukrainian trade union of servicemen and war veterans and other persons, the results of medical assistance provided to ATO veterans. Our speakers are Oleksandr Mamatov, chairman of Ukrainian Trade Union of Servicemen, Oleksandr Kitin, representative of Ukrainian War Veterans Trade Union, Oleksiy Krasnoschokov, and Roman Zvinitsky. Our state is doing a lot of useful things for our servicemen who participate in ATO. Unfortunately, today, many of our young guys have become disabled after the war. Many issues are addressed, but there are many which are not addressed, and which today we see many obstacles today. The latest thing that happened a few days ago, Geneva Sanatorium, one tender, and the ATO veterans came to that place to rest for about 24 hours. They were waiting till they will be provided accommodation. Then the food was very, very bad. It was a very bad quality. They addressed us. We discussed that. Today, all of them are put to rooms. Some of them came from the war with their families. Now they are provided good meals, high quality meals, and that is what's happening in Ukraine. Also, identifying the status of the disabled person after the war. This is an outstanding issue. There are many issues related to the volunteers who were killed. There is one volunteer who was killed in Donetsk airport. His father, for more than a year, is trying to get the status so that he's recognized as the person who was killed in Donetsk airport when he was executing his duty. Our state, provides a lot of money to ATO participants, but they forget about veterans and disabled. After the Second World War, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Egypt, there were several wars. I will give now the floor to the IDP, who for a long time cannot get any accommodation. The money is provided for that, but who receives this money, I don't know. The floor is given to Pavlo Kovalchuk. Starting from 1985, I've been the participant in military actions. In Afghanistan, I received the certificate. I was in Afghanistan for 42 days, but I received that certificate. And then I became the disabled person of the war, invalid of the war. I have 3 children. I have 2 grandchildren, but I cannot live where I am registered, because I am registered together with my family in a 2-room apartment of 2-storied building which has no gas, water supply, sewage, just the stove heating. How can I live? The person who's disabled person of the war, who can take water and coal to the 2nd floor. So I cannot live there with my family, and I haven't been living there for a long time. I also cannot enjoy any privileges that the state provided, because the privileges are provided only at the place of registration. But for 30 years, someone is receiving money, which I had to be receiving. Why? Once there are state programs to provide accommodation to such category of people as myself, then why till now my family lives in poverty wherever we can? And now the guys who come back from ATO, I know I 30 years ago I was in their shoes, and if the state does not change its attitude to such people, then this will cause some social outburst. Thank you. Alexander Kitin. I'm Alexander Kitin. I'm the first group disabled person of ATO. I'm the first of the volunteers who received the certificate of the disabled person in the result of the war. That was very difficult to receive it, with big difficulties everywhere. Wherever you go, the civil servants start saying that it's not they who are to be blamed, it's those who are on top. And to get this certificate, I had to attract the attention of mass media. In the result, I succeeded, but then there are problems related to getting the pension or some privileges, and the same thing with getting an accommodation, an apartment. It looks like the civil servants don't want to help. They do everything to complicate the situation. Also, I would like to say about what's happening with rehabilitation in Ukraine. Well, I received the wound a year and a half ago. I could not find any medical establishment where I could get high quality rehabilitation. Thanks to volunteers, I was in Denmark. I went to a special school of walking, and they taught how to teach to walk on a prosthesis. In Ukraine, we don't have such a school, even though a lot of money is allocated for rehabilitation of war veterans and disabled persons after the war. The question is why this money is not used, and who should we ask the question why many programs do not work, like our civil service has executed only 7% of what they had to execute. Why the civil servants are operating so inefficiently? Maybe something should be changed. And also the new budget horrifies us. They want to cancel free travel for all categories of privileged persons, so that this is done from the local budget, which means that such people will not be able even to get to their place of work. Also, they want to cancel compensations to guys who in the ATO, the compensation of salary. So if a person is recruited, that means that the person will lose a job. And that is done probably, that is done, but nothing is done to encourage person to go to war and then come back to a working place. The initiator of our social policies, well, they canceled the free footwear for disabled children under the age of 18. This is the footwear which could basically be like a treatment for children.
Правде о том, сколько денег было потрачено.
I read an article about how much money was spent by the Ministry of Social Policy to develop the single database. But there were a lot of money allocated, but nothing has been done. Just imagine, $51 million were spent, but they have not finished it, and they will get another $56 million to develop the database. We are trying to save money on children's footwear. We're creating some system which no one sees. Where are the servers? How the money was spent? We need to ask these questions to a new anti-corruption prosecutor's office. They should provide answers, but they will again say that's not us, it's the predecessors. There are plenty of civil servants who are responsible for these programs, but they say, I was just signing. But once you signed, you have to answer where the money was spent. A child is disabled because many parents, because of the poverty, cannot buy such footwear, orthopedic footwear, which costs about 2,000 hryvnias. And they deprive the child of the chance to get treated. It's better for the state to have this child as a disabled person than to pay pension. I don't know. The state is not interested in these things, but they're interested in new loans. In 2014, 300 million loan was taken for that program to develop the new database, but it hasn't been developed. So we need to look at who is guilty. I believe that those people who are guilty in that are to be punished. And the same situation is with decentralization. We do need decentralization. European best practices show that. But it shouldn't be happening like here. Like it took France 10 years. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Roman Zeminsky. I was wounded in February 2014 during Maidan events. As of today, I received no assistance from the state, and my category of disability is equal to the second category of general disabilities. All the money and all the assistance which I received for my artificial limb were got from volunteers, all the diaspora volunteers who organized my treatment there and rehabilitation there. I had spent 1 year in the abroad. When I came back to Ukraine, I further participated in volunteering raids to the ATO area, and I would like to mention that even the surgery to my wounded limbs were done by Canadian surgeons who, when I became desperate to find any qualified assistance in Ukraine, that is what I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Any questions, dear journalists? The briefing was announced as the summing up the results of your organization's work, and I have heard 4 different stories. What are the results of your work as an organization? Our organization unites the participants of ATO operations, and we managed to assist more than 1,000 families of those who were killed in this war to get the status of their families of war veterans. And we managed to get that 16% of tax is not collected from pensions of the war veterans. And just imagine that families of those who were killed in combat activities, their families received their pension minus 16% of tax. Also, we as an organization, we provide assistance to our members to get the status of the war veterans and war invalids, just like our fellow mentioned. And for more than 6 months, we drafted a special program providing guidelines for authorities how to allocate properly funds for rehabilitation of disabled war veterans. For example, for the next year in the state budget, big amounts of money are allocated for psychological assistance to the war veterans and the war veterans, but participants of ATO. I met several times with the president of the country, convincing him that we should involve also all war veterans, not just participants of the war in the East. But all participants of all wars, including the Afghanistan war. We have 1,400 members of our organizations who joined National Guard of Ukraine immediately after Maidan, but they all were considered to be the reserved servicemen, and when they are killed, when they are wounded, they do not get the status of the war participant, and this is a nonsense when dozens of people who were wounded, who became disabled in result of war, but they do not get all the privileges and all the allowances to be given to them by the state. I met with the members of the Cabinet of Ministers and pointed out that children of the ATO participants who become students, they are provided with special privileges, that is, they should not pay for student hostels and for utility services. But unfortunately, this law has several loopholes which prevents it from proper implementation. And currently, we develop some amendments to this law. Let's look at the aviation university. For example, they managed to implement this law, and this is a good example. Any questions well, since there are no further questions, thank you very much. It's time to start the next briefings. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all your work. We wish you all successes in the incoming year, and we wish that the state may hear you. And in some minutes, we will listen to Colonel Lysenko.